Greetings from the majestic foothills of California's Sierra Nevada mountains, and welcome back to the only podcast completely dedicated to bringing childhood back outside. I'm your host, Kenny Ballantyne. Today we are going to get into some risky business. Risky play, that is. We are talking with Rusty Keeler about adventure playgrounds, International Mud Day, and the real meaning of play. All of that and more in today's episode of Nature Kids Radio.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in.
Nature Kids Radio is a production of the Nature Kids Institute. And if you haven't already, head on over to naturekidsinstitute.org for videos, resources, and a free online course on connecting children with nature. Now, today our guest is Rusty Keeler from Ithaca, New York. He is the author of Natural Playscapes, creating outdoor play environments for the soul. You can learn more about Rusty and see some of his amazing playscape designs over at earthplay.net. Rusty, perhaps you can start us off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about what you do and why you're so passionate about it.
Sure. My name is Rusty Keeler, and I'm in Ithaca, New York, and I design playgrounds, but I specialize in designing natural play spaces for kids to kind of help them connect to nature and to kind of get into all the good stuff of the natural world. I started off as an industrial designer, and I went to school for industrial design at RIT in Rochester, New York. And then after school, I moved out west, wanted to go out west and have adventures. And I ended up getting a job as an industrial designer at a playground equipment manufacturer in Olympia, Washington, called Big Toys. And it was a great time to get this job with them because they had just got bought out by this big Danish company, Compan, and they wanted to do all this new stuff, a whole line of equipment, and have it really based as purely as possible on children's play, like really look at play and child development, and then come up with products and equipment that would stimulate all sorts of great play and development in kids. So I came along and got this great job, and then also really learned about play, the beauty and importance of play, and loved it. And then had this amazing opportunity to kind of work in the Netherlands at a sister company of theirs, another group that had been bought by this Danish company. And it was kind of over there where my ideas shifted from traditional play equipment, what I call fixed playground equipment, fixed equipment because it doesn't move, you can't change it really, and it's planted in the ground, to more thinking about natural play environments and the whole environment, the whole play area as the opportunity for children's play and discovery. And I just kind of switched all my thinking. I was kind of a lot of things kind of happen at the same time. You're over in Europe, and as a designer, especially, your eyes are huge because you're just amazed at all the interesting design, whether it's product design or architecture and landscape. But for me as a play designer, I saw their play areas were much more raw and interesting and natural than just having a piece of playground equipment plopped on a flat surface. Back then, doing playground equipment, you'd often make the area flat. You'd take out hills so that you could put the equipment in, or you take out trees so the equipment could go in. And what I was realizing was that that's actually the best stuff. Play equipment has its place, but so I was also then kind of thinking about where I played as a kid. What were my favorite places, and it was really the fields behind my house where I explored, and through all the seasons and everything. So I just kept thinking about how to weave that into children's environments instead of just having fixed equipment. Actually, kind of funny I will tell you the exact moment when it all kind of switched. I had this great project to do more play sculpture. So not so much play equipment in a playground, but play sculpture that would be kind of just dotted throughout the city. Children, they'd have some play sculpture that they'd go by on their way between home and school, or as they're going to a shopping, in the shopping area, there'd be some interesting sculpture. And I was thinking, all right, I want to design a piece of sculpture, a big play sculpture that kids could climb, or they could sit and read a book underneath, or they could, it make sounds in the wind, or it would change over time, or it would be interested in the rain and all this stuff. And then I was realizing that I was trying to design a tree.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I thought, well, why don't we start putting trees, in children's environments, and the whole idea of like trees and bushes and shrubs and hills and grass, and really just having a natural environment for kids to explore the way that humans and kids have always explored, throughout human history, just having connections to the natural world. So that's kind of how I got on this journey.
Very cool. Well, then maybe a good question is from there, what do you think is missing in what I guess what I'd call the typical American play space and the way they're used?
Well, I think when people think of when people think of playgrounds, they think of just the equipment often, or they used to. Hopefully that's changing. But I think, the typical American playground is just, a safe, strong piece of fixed play equipment surrounded by its proper depth of wood chips or, resilient surfacing. And, there it is in a park, there it is at a school, boom, kids can climb, they can slide, there's certain things they can do. And, it can be challenging and interesting. For a certain amount of time. But after a certain amount of time, it gets dull and boring, and especially if kids are using it day after day after day, whether it's school or a child care center. So if you only have the fixed equipment, you may feel good, like, wow, okay, we raised a lot of money and we spent a lot of money and we all work together and we put this in, but it's not offering really children the chance to change their environment or explore their environment or kind of learn about the world around them, or doesn't really offer the chance to create their own worlds, or really explore the world the way that I think like natural play areas, or being in the woods, of course, or in a beach, or those are the natural environment kind of offers infinite possibilities for play and discovery, day after day, different weather, different seasons. And I'd say traditional fixed playground equipment will offer, in their catalogs, they talk about, there's 26 different play features, or the 40 kids can be active at the same time doing this and that, which is great and interesting, but it doesn't have the kind of the depth and infinite possibilities of the natural world.
The kinds of play spaces you're advocating for are they necessarily just an open field of grass, or just a natural space, or are we making something here?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a whole range of possibilities of kind of connecting children through nature and providing environments for just kind of playful learning and discovery. So I guess it's like everything, it's a spectrum. So you could just have a blank backyard that has grass and trees and some shrubs, and kids are exploring and they're finding, they can dig for worms. I guess that's when, well, we can get into the idea of loose parts and tools and everything to explore. But you could just have a natural yard, or you could have you could build a natural playground, this kind of natural playground, natural playscape movement, where you may take a flat area and you may build hills, you may put in pathways. And, I work with groups all over the place, childcare centers and schools and parks, to think, all right, well, let's do a play space, but let's make it a natural play space. And so, I've done it where it used to be a parking lot, and suddenly you're building hills and you're planting trees, and you can have gardens, or you have sand and water, messy digging areas, and you can have little farm areas. And some people are having animals, chickens, or I have people that want to have goats and sheep, and so there's the kind of natural playground. And then there's the kind of even farther on the spectrum is like the idea of forest schools and nature kindergartens, where kids are just outside the whole time, all day long. We can get in that more. It's this movement that started in, kind of Northern Europe, but it's kind of just the idea of like kids are always in nature. But they started formalizing it and having these schools where kids are outside all the time. And it's play, it's a mix of play and learning and discovery. But I like that idea too of just kids playing in the woods, and no matter where they live. If it's the woods, if it's in the prairie, if it's by creeks or at the beach, and all seasons and all weather kind of thing. And then there's even further along the line, it's kind of how my own progression has been getting into these adventure playgrounds, which are kind of the ultimate of kid-built, kid-constructed, filled with loose parts for building, fort building, den building, house building, mud pie making, mud kitchens. So I'm working on one now. My favorite project in the whole world here in Ithaca, New York, called the Hands-on Nature Anarchy Zone, and it's at the Ithaca Children's Garden here. So it's a beautiful natural environment, and we have all these crazy hills, and we've gotten loads of topsoil and celebrated International Mud Day there. And there's boards and tires and straw bales and rope and all sorts of mud kitchen utensils and teapots and stuff, and shovels and rakes. And then you just let kids just go for it. With the support of trained play workers there, just letting kids be kids and build forts and climb trees and make mud pies or have mud fights, or build all sorts of crazy contraptions and then tear them down. And so that's kind of I would say the extreme opposite of like the fixed playground equipment. That's there it is, it's planted in the ground and it's safe, and but kids can't change it. And then you have the adventure playground, and let alone if it's a natural adventure playground where kids are really just exploring and digging and kind of creating their own fun, structuring their own play.
Nice. Thanks for giving that. I really like that broad spectrum you painted there of all the possibilities that exist. Very
sure.
Cool. Yeah. What I'd like to get into next then are risks and benefits, because I could see two probably common concerns, not just with the adventure playgrounds, but really everything you just described. One being, I think that I'm sure there's parents who believe that the fixed playground is a move forward in progress, because away from the natural playscape, because it's creating a space that is safer for kids or more intelligently designed for kids. And so I'm wondering what you have to say about the safety and the place of risk in children's play, and just what is meant by beneficial risk, which are two words that I think a lot of adults would not like to see together.
Great question and great topic. And it's interesting with the idea of risk. Risk is always a hot topic, but what's interesting now is that it used to be that risk, eliminating risk and managing risk, that was the hot topic, especially with playgrounds and safety. Like people were talking about, we've got to get rid of all risk. But now, which is so exciting, risk is again a hot topic, but it's not now what's interesting and what's so exciting is that people are talking about how to bring risk back to children's play, for children to have the opportunity to assess risk and to learn to manage their own risk and challenge themselves and have adventure. And so, if you think about traditional playground equipment, again, there it is. It's planted in the ground, and the best equipment has been super engineered and following federal, playground safety guidelines, and so the equipment itself is pretty safe, and they've done everything they can to eliminate risk. But children, just part of the natural process of growing and becoming and realizing oneself, it's about taking risks. It's about take it to the next level and challenging yourself, and whether it's walking on a balance beam or a fallen log, or where maybe you've never done that before and you're challenging yourself, or you're jumping off something higher. And so the idea of taking that away from children, you're not going to stop children, I guess, maybe is a point. You're not going to stop children from wanting to take risks. So you find on traditional playground equipment that children are still pushing the limits. Even though this equipment is safe, it follows all the guidelines, children will, okay, it's designed. Slow down here. We can edit into this part. There's just so much here. So if you picture traditional fixed playground equipment, and there's monkey bars and slides and climbing apparatus kind of thing, and it's designed for a certain age group. Say there's a 2 to 5 year old piece of play equipment, or 7 to 11-year-old, and it's great for that age group. But as children are progressing, so at some point they've mastered the monkey bars, they've mastered the slide, they've mastered the climbing wall to get up to this area. But they're going to constantly want to take it to the next level, because and we want them to. But with fixed equipment, they will push it past what the equipment was designed for. So they will climb to the top of the tower, and then they'll want to jump off that because they've had all the success jumping off the monkey bars or jumping off some higher pole, and then they climb to the top and jump off. In one sense, that's great. You want to kind of just support, wow, you really feel confident you're doing that. Great. But that's how injuries happen, because that playground equipment wasn't really designed for those kind of jumps, or the resilient surface wasn't rated for that high off. And then that's where you see the big, the broken arms, the broken legs, what they call the big bone breakages, long bone breakages. So children are always challenging themselves. So now there's all this talk in early childhood programs and parks of the idea of, well, how can we bring risk back into managed risk? How can we look at the benefits of risk? And that's big conversation in the whole forest school movement too, of saying, instead of just weighing to manage them away, you're saying, what are the benefits of risks? And so they will actually go through and do a risk-benefit analysis. You can really get your clipboard out and do a real vigorous analysis of anything in your playground or anything in the woods. And you can imagine a big fallen log and a kid on it, and maybe that log is above the ground, and you can say, well, what are the risks? Okay, he or she they could fall off, or they could bonk their head and or they could scrape their arm and on the bark and get scratched, or there's some pokey branches. And so you look at the risks, but then you make another column on your clipboard and you say, well, but what are you say that, well, the benefits are that they are challenging themselves. They are, they're balancing, on something that's pretty challenging. They are climbing something. They are, maybe they're doing it it's big enough that they do it with their friends. So there's social interactions. There's rites of passage. There's, and you can just make this huge list, and, maybe the risks outweigh the benefits, but, more often than not, the benefits are outweighing the risks. So I think what we're trying to do in these conversations is give adults tools and ways that they can feel comfortable allowing kids to take risks and challenge themselves the way that kids want to. we don't really have to give kids permission. They want to do all this stuff. They want to challenge themselves. They want to climb. They want to balance. They want to push the limits according to how comfortable they feel. You know, I, I think in the past we haven't given kids enough credit for for knowing how, when they're comfortable, when they're not comfortable, for knowing when they want to take risks, when they're ready to take it. I think adults have always felt like we have to protect, but really I think we have to find ways that we can feel comfortable to step back, take deep breaths, and and let kids do what they want to do. It also brings up the idea, though, our role as adults to get rid of hazards and to differentiate. I think that's important too, between risks and hazards. Risks are things people talk about. The idea of risks are things that children can choose. That fallen log. They see the log. It's risky, but they can choose that risk. They can get on it. They get on the branches, and they can decide they want to do that. A hazard is something that is hidden, that's unsafe, that they might not see, and it would surprise them. They're not choosing, and that would be like broken glass or a chunk of rebar sticking out somewhere, or some sharp rocks or something like that. So as adults, we want to get rid of hazards out of children's environments, but we want to find ways that we can allow allow children to take risks and have these adventurous play opportunities. Well, I just think the most important thing is having adults find ways that they can say yes to children, yes to children's play, and it, whether it's parents, taking deep breaths and allowing their kids to do this stuff, or childcare centers, early child development experts and professionals, or school recess kind of thing, of finding ways that we can say yes to children's play and discovery.
And what do you think puts an adult in a position where they can be ready to say yes?
Great question. A lot of times I think the first step is to remember back to your own childhood play experiences, and remember the things that you did. Remember that maybe you took risks, and what were your favorite places, and what were the scary places, or what were the things that you did. And then suddenly you remember that. You kind of get those places in your heart, in your memory, in your mind. And then you think, oh yeah, those are the great places. Those are the things I really enjoyed. And those are the places I grew. Maybe it was a place that I skinned my knee, but it was also the place that I did great things, by myself or with my friends. So I think that that memory can start to normalize the idea of children today having those same opportunities, having those same chances to grow and take risks. So if that's the first step, just kind of having those memories of play. I think the next is that idea that people all over are wanting to do this, and that so if somebody's kind of questioning, like, do I want to bring more risk into my children's play, whether it's a parent or a teacher, to know that there's people all over the place that are thinking the same thing. And I think some of these tools of the idea of like looking at the benefits of risk, and you can be as vigorous as going through and doing those kind of risk benefit analysis of all the different aspects of the child's environment, and at the same time it's also knowing your children and trusting your children and observing your children, watching what they do, watching what they feel comfortable with. If your child is ready for stuff, you're going to let them. You're going to give them a longer leash, so to speak, to try things. And I have this happen all the time with my 2.5-year-old. He's very adventurous, but at the same time, I'm amazed at how sensible he is on the risks that he takes. And so I let him do a lot of amazing things, and but I always find, like, if we're at the beach or in a park or a music festival, I can see people around me nervous because they don't, like, wow, there's this kid on the beach and there's nobody around, but I'm around, I'm watching, and I'm ready to jump in if I have to. But for the most part, I like just letting him explore. And I think about even when he was like climbing stairs, he was a lot younger. Like, I'm right there to catch him. I can jump in, um, but I don't have to. And most of the time, I never have to do anything. So then I think about from his perspective, he is just climbing the stairs or he is climbing the tree, and I'm there to catch him, and maybe he's somewhat aware of that, but at the same time, he's just charging ahead and progressing in his development of life and exploration of the world and his own development of himself. Okay, I got another tool. I think that maybe this could lead into the whole idea of play work. So I think the idea of adults giving adults tools to say and ways to feel comfortable saying yes. I think we can look towards the European model of play work. And play work kind of came from these adventure playgrounds that started in Europe after World War II, where kids were kind of playing in bomb sites, bricks and rubble. But there was amazing play going on. They were building houses and making mud pies and having mud kitchens and doing this amazing stuff. And the adults recognized this, and then they started designating spaces. The first adventure playgrounds were called junk playgrounds, because kids were just messing with all these loose parts and building all sorts of great forts and dens and incredible play. But then what came out of that was this whole profession called play work. And in Europe, you can get degreed, you get trained as a play worker, but then there's degrees. You can get bachelor's, master's, PhD in play work. And what it really is a way that, to have a site, a space for children's play with adults there. But they're not leading the play. They're not calling the shots. They're not really trying to affect the play at all. In some ways, they're trying to just let kids have just the ultimate freedom and to structure their own play, as if of days of old when kids were just in fields or vacant lots or neighborhoods without any adults. A play worker is there to kind of support children's play in whatever they need. So I think that's something that I think schools and childcare centers can really look to that as a model of thinking, okay, well, how can I, as a teacher or a parent, I want my kid to play. I want them to be able to have that kind of freedom. So I can step in and I can get rid of hazards that'll make me feel more comfortable. But then I can also provide, play props. I can put in loose parts, boards or tires, or I can give them shovels or magnifying glasses, and then I can stand back. I think that's the thing too with parents, and teachers, of you don't have to be a part of it. You can just let kids have their own space and stand back and let them play. And one of the play work principles, one of the things they talk about is you could even have the idea of a cloak of invisibility, where you try to just be mostly invisible and let kids have their own play, but you can step in if you need to for safety. If someone's going to fall and you think you can catch them, or if something's going on, you can step in. Or you can become invisible and you step in and you put in some more play props. You add an extra board if you know they're going to need it, or you just happen to drop in some rope, and then because that they're building some fort and they could use that, or you can kind of help stimulate the play, but you're not trying to affect the play.
Right. Well, how do you make a case for this kind of play for nature play in general, but also this sort of adventure playground, anarchy zone kind of play, with respect to say families that are doing the school thing and the sports thing and the after school stuff, and how can you make something like making mud pies and building forts sound relevant and important in a this sort of high competitive education world?
Right. Um, well, we all want our kids to thrive and excel and be the best people they can and grow to their full potential. And I think what people are learning and studying and research going on now all over the place, realizing that children really need their own time to do a lot of this, to explore their themselves, their own creativity. That it used to be like we wanted to give them, we wanted to take them to soccer practice and violin lessons and Mandarin lessons and dance class and to enrich their lives with, all these kind of extracurricular activities to fill them up, to make them, as good as the best they can be. But I think what we're realizing now is, and in one sense, it's common sense, and on the other hand, there's actually research that show this, that children just having their own time by themselves, with their friends, kind of away from adults and away from structured activities, gives them the opportunities to have extended periods of time where they're being creative, or they're making their own games, they're building their own forts, or they're inventing, they're creating their own inventions. And that often happens not in a class, not in a after school program, but really it happens kind of in their own. And so studies are showing that like they've done like cognitive tests of like kids that are with their parents for a certain period of time doing some sort of play, and then they do some tests, versus kids that are just kind of on their own playing by themselves for the same period of time. Those kids score higher when they've had their own time to structure their own play and activities. So in that sense, I think the idea of kids having the time, the space, and the materials to structure their own play and to find themselves, to be themselves, and be with their friends during that.
I'm wondering now if you could give some sort of direct advice to the three audiences that my content usually reaches. Those being parents, educators, and people who work in either park systems or outdoor recreation. So let's start with parents and families who may be interested in bringing more natural play or risk and autonomy into their child's lives. What would be some good first steps?
Sure. So again, I think it's the idea of providing time, space, and materials for children's play. So the idea of time would be just for kids having unscheduled, just free time where they can structure their own play. The space then would be thinking about, well, what is your backyard like? If you have a backyard, can you bring in more natural materials? For one thing, can you have plants? Can you do some garden stuff? Can you have opportunities for kids just to explore and have some ownership over that land? Could children even have some ideas about what they would want to design and build, and you can have a little project. And then so even that gets into the materials. Like, can you bring in some loose parts? The idea of the anarchy zone, the adventure playground that's just filled with loose parts. Could you bring in some straw bales? Could you have one corner of your yard that you say it's okay? You give them shovels and let them dig. They can dig holes or dig whatever they want. Or can you have an area that has water that you can have mud making, and you can have that far away from your back, the door, so that kids aren't tracking it into the house. But I think just ways that you can say yes, and maybe that if you have a backyard, you can do that in your backyard. or if it's a neighborhood, maybe you can get together and do that in a corner of a park. But then really kind of that idea of cardboard boxes, the idea of providing these materials that are completely open-ended, is so different than the idea of the fixed playground equipment. So you could bring just cardboard boxes and let kids go for it and build forts and build race cars or rocket ships, the whole deal. And then once you start seeing that, and once kids can have some positive experiences with that, they'll want to do more and more and more. And then suddenly kids are, they might be ready for some tools, and they might be ready to, really start constructing things, or maybe they'll want to do carpentry, and then they'll start learning more about those kind of skills and those kind of tools. Or if it's in the natural world, they'll start asking more questions as they're digging in the dirt, or they're finding rocks or worms or birds' nests in trees. And so suddenly they have this time and space to just kind of get in there. And then again, their play and interest in the world is always progressing, and you can follow them through it and love it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's move to schools, where we have teachers and administrators who have to deal with A, regulations, and
Yeah.
B, budget limitations.
Sure.
So if I'm an educator or an administrator of a school, and I see the potential in this kind of play experience and why it's relevant, I get passionate about it, then I want to do something about it. Where do I start?
Sure. That's great. Yeah, I think more and more schools all over the place are starting to realize that they want to bring more playful experiences back to children's daily environment and daily experience at school. So, there was kind of this trend of cutting recess because to focus on academics, cutting recess, or, shortening it or eliminating it. But now, schools all over the States are looking to models of like the schools in Finland, where there's like huge recess, long recesses, or breaks every 45 minutes for children just to go outside and blow off steam. And then what you look at places like Finland is that the academic the levels are high, highest in the world, and yet there's play that's woven into children's daily academic day. And so people are realizing and remembering that that's a really important part of childhood and a part of learning. So people are all over are interested in bringing that kind of back to schools. And so, but they're still dealing with test scores and with, safety regulations and stuff like that. But that's totally fine. There's so many things that people can do to just start taking these small steps. And it's still the same idea of like the cardboard box concept, and the loose parts. So, a school probably has its own fixed playground equipment that meets the guidelines and all that kind of stuff. But then a first step might be to have these loose parts. And a lot of schools are starting to just get shipping containers or storage sheds and filling them with different kinds of loose materials that can be brought out during recess, and then kids can like use it for play and build forts and dens and make games with it. And it could be things like blankets and rope, or traffic cones, or boards, or hula hoops, or all sorts of stuff. And suddenly there's this you have the fixed equipment on one hand, but then you have all these loose things that kids can build with. So amazing things can happen. And then that ties directly into science and math and things that are going on inside the classroom. Another thing that schools are doing are starting to re-look at their own schoolyards. And, if schools have budgets or they're doing fundraising, they may redesign their schoolyards to be more natural, to have more connections to the natural world, and to have loose parts, and for kids to be able to, whether it's outdoor classroom or just natural play. But schools that don't have a budget, no matter what budget you have, schools are all over are starting to then look at their schoolyard as it exists now, because there may be the blacktop and there may be the fixed playground equipment, But off in the corner, there's this scrubby woods that they ignored for 20 years. They didn't go. The kids aren't even allowed to go back there. You can't go in the woods. You can't go in the weeds. You can't go, by that creek. Now schools suddenly are like having this whole flip flop and realizing, wait, that's the good stuff. We can start to take our classes in there for science. We can start to, go through the woods and make it a little bit safe, or put trails through there, and we can have classes in there, or we can even let recess flow into these woods or flow into this wild area. And so that may just be a line of trees kind of on a border, on a schoolyard, if it's an urban schoolyard. Or sometimes if there's these schools that are on the edge of town or in rural areas, they may have amazing wooded areas that they just haven't used. And so now, because of this whole movement, they're starting to think about, okay, how can we develop that? How can we work together as administrators and teachers and recess aides to think, okay, how can we offer this woods to the children? How do we develop rules and standards and ways of using it, but really letting kids get in there and be involved in all the good stuff and interacting and digging in and exploring and playing. And people are doing it and having, I hear stories all the time about just how they're using these wild spaces again. And there's some study that just came out about when kids are asked, where do you want to be? Do you want to be on the playground? Do you want to be in schoolyard? 90% say they want to go in the woods, and that's both for play, recess time, and if they could have their classroom in there, that's where they would want to be. So now people are starting to say, oh well, let's do it.
Awesome. That's a great answer.
Right.
And then finally, I find that I'm often working with people in park systems and outdoor recreation, mostly because they're struggling with trying to attract young people and children into their programming. And what I often find, it's because, well, they are, some kind of level of outdoor recreation, say it's, like a fly fishing organization, and they're trying to attract kids to come out and do this thing where these kids have never even played in dirt. And they're expecting them to make this jump to something that's sort of on a farther end of the spectrum. And so I've been trying to sort of help guide people towards, no, look, if you really want to get kids way over here, you got to start with play, down at a different level, something that you guys took for granted when you were young, but they're not having at all. And so I'm wondering, in this whole world that you're describing, what could they take away from what you advocate for and teach that could help them sort of reach out to younger people and get them outdoors and involved in their programming?
Yeah, I think that's great, and right on the idea of, you want to just give children the opportunity first just to be in the natural world and fall in love with it. And so often once kids just have a little bit of time in the dirt, by a creek, in the woods, in a meadow, by the beach, they're absolutely going to fall in love with it. There's so many amazing things to discover and so many questions that arise, and it is, again, it's like infinite possibilities. So really, these organizations, just the idea of providing the opportunity for kids to just get in and fall in love with the outdoors, that's going to spark their imaginations and their interest, and it's going to be in their heart, and then they're going to want to take more steps, and then they may find that they are interested in birds, or they're interested in fishing, or they're interested in gardening, or so then they can kind of take it to the next level as they get older in what maybe these programs may have to offer. But it's interesting, in Ithaca, at the Ithaca Children's Garden, with the Hands on Nature Anarchy Zone, one of our first funders and supporters was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And one of their big missions is to connect children and families to nature, because they know that, that's, if you form deep connections as a child, you're going to care about the natural world and the environment and be a steward as you become an adult. And then you're going to pass that on. And so they want to, kind of, I guess, create the next generation of stewards today. And so we had lots of conversations about this. And, I think maybe the typical way of some of these organizations is to, well, we'll do signage, and we'll do programs and that kind of thing. And then through our conversations, we decided what we want children to do is just have playful opportunities to be in nature, just to be able to play, to mess around. And so if you're digging with a shovel, and because you're making some fort in the weeds, you're also seeing the butterflies that are there. You're seeing the spider web that has made some wild web, or you're digging up some, maybe a fossil in the ground, and and then it does then invite all these questions that could come up, and then kids are going to want to kind of continue on in science, in the natural world, in some of the more hardcore programming kinds of things, but first just to have it be a playful experience. And so the Children's Garden of the Anarchy Zone, they would have summer camp, and they would have, each week would be a different theme, and one might be a gardening theme, or one might be a bird theme, and they'd have different people come in and they'd lead things and program it. And it was successful and people love it, and the garden's an amazing place. But then just since the Anarchy Zone kicked off, we're in our third year now, this year, they started having weeks that really the theme was just play, was just playful exploration in the natural world, where there wasn't any, it wasn't any garden thing, it wasn't any set program, it was just play. And that became hugely popular, and parents and the whole community is like totally supporting this idea, and they want kids to do this because more and more people want their kids to have places where they can feel comfortable for the kids to have unstructured play, where they can just dig in. So that's been really exciting and interesting, because they've had such a long, 10 years, they've had very set programs, but now just the idea of having unstructured play in the natural setting has been amazing for everybody.
Right. Oh, so that's so cool. So that's exactly the kind of example I needed then, is that, once they turn the focus to playing and the kids come.
Yes.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we've about covered everything that I wanted to cover. Do you have any sort of final wrap-up takeaway for our listeners you'd like to throw in?
Well, I think what's so exciting is that so many people are contemplating this, are thinking about this, are thinking about ways that we can reconnect children to nature, but then also reconnect children to play. And, whether it's, just families themselves kind of creating these opportunities for the kids, but also neighborhoods and schools and or multiple parents. And so now all over the country, there's people that are like forming these groups to like start these adventure playgrounds with loose parts and play workers. And, they might start off small by just having play days in a neighborhood park, and they bring in cardboard and rope and parachutes and, all sorts of stuff. And they'll just have these play days. But the idea that it will develop into more of these adventure playgrounds in parks and things where kids can have these kind of opportunities. So, I think if you believe this, if you believe that children need more play and they need connections to the natural world, you're definitely not alone. And so it might just be putting some feelers out in your community to find other people who believe that. And you can start to put your heads together and think about how in your own community you can start to create these kind of amazing opportunities for children's play in nature.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. That was fun. It was good. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
That's our program for today. Next week, we will be joined by Debbie Hong of Go Explore Nature. Debbie is a blogger and passionate kids and nature advocate who will unravel the secrets of connecting kids with nature in urban communities and how to find time for nature in the typical high-paced and busy childhood of today. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Kenny Ballantyne, and I will see you outside.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me out forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Just turn me loose, let me straddle my old saddle.